Um, Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the Navigating Identity in Tech event today. My name is Josie, and I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as a cis straight woman, and I am an undergraduate academic advisor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. So this event came about after a lot of brainstorming, probably all year, around the theme of making sure students know the power of their own identities and the value they bring. Nick Gofford and I both advise STEM students, and something that we've noticed while advising is how some students struggle to discuss their marginalized identities and how to leverage said identities and experiences while navigating their academic and career planning. This panel is to present tech-interested students with the unique perspectives of these panelists and how to leverage your identities during the career planning process. We know we cannot talk about all identities a person may have during this short event, and today we are focusing on students who hold marginalized gender and sexual identities, these being identities that have been historically underrepresented within the tech industry. During the panel, you're encouraged to use the chat function. We're trying to make this as interactive as possible. The panelists would love to hear any questions you have and try to address them during our conversation. It's in webinar format, so chat is how you'll be able to interact the best. We will also have some time at the end of the event to answer any questions you have. So now I'll hand it over to Nick to introduce himself and to start meeting our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josie. Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for this event. My name is Nick Gofford. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a career counselor in the College of Liberal Arts here at the University of Minnesota. I identify as a white cis man who is queer, and I'm excited to be one of your co-facilitators for this event. I'm very excited to introduce our panelists today who have such great experiences that they're very eager to share with you all. And we're really excited just to really dive into this topic because we feel it's super important. So I am going to let the three panelists introduce themselves, and then we will go right into the first question to fully utilize our time today. So I'm gonna start off with Laurel. I'll have the panelists introduce themselves a little bit so you all can get to know them, and then we will go into questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laurel Hunt. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from the U of M in 2017, and I'm a product design engineer at Anderson Windows. And we'll talk some more about how I came to be here, but I'm excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I am Arthur Schultz. I am currently a project manager at Harassment Medical Components. I graduated from the U of M with a bachelor's in biomedical engineering from the Institute of Technology when it was called that in 2008. And I use the he, him, his pronouns.
Hi, I'm Carmen DeCudo. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a product marketer in the BI and analytics space at a company called Sisense. And I graduated with a degree in global studies back in 2013 from CLA.
Awesome. It's really great to see the representation from both CSC and CLA today. And thank you again for being with us. We really appreciate your time. So we will go right into the first question, which is, tell us about your academic journey here at the University of Minnesota and how you've now arrived at this place in your career.
All right, I'll start it off. So I started at the U in 2013. I was really interested in science and math. And so I kind of figured that if you put the two together, you get engineering, which is kind of true. Anyway, so I ended up in mechanical engineering because I really liked physics. Didn't entirely know what I wanted to do afterwards. And while I was at the U, I also realized that I'm gay. And through the process of trying to find a community there, I stumbled upon a startup student group called OSTEM and got involved. I was secretary the first year, and then I was president in the second year. That was a really awesome way for me to find a community of people who had a lot in common with me and were navigating this kind of space as well. so let's see. So I was at the career fair right before my senior year, and I kind of accidentally stumbled across the table for Anderson Windows. They're like, hey, do you have a resume? I was like, yeah, sure. They were like, hey, do you want to interview? I was like, yeah, sure. And ended up being an intern there, and then being offered a full-time job at the end of my internship. So it was actually kind of like a happy accident. I ended up really enjoying the internship and have enjoyed it there so far. So yeah, I've been at Anderson for the past 3 years with a little bit of an asterisk, because last year I applied to a position with the Peace Corps to do water resources engineering in Peru. I accepted the position. I left Anderson to go do that, and then COVID happened. So I spent part of 2020 being unemployed. I'm sure some people can relate. And I actually went up to Alaska to work on a family fish processing barge. So, and actually got to do some engineering there as well. So it's kind of a circuitous route, but I'm back at Anderson for the time being, and working in product design now.
So talking about my journey. So when I was looking at what I wanted to be when I grew up in high school, my mom was working for Medtronic in the industry, and she was in their neurostimulation division. And when she had moved into that new role in that company, she brought home some like marketing materials and showed me a video of a deep brain stimulation on a Parkinson's patient, and just showed like what happens to the patient's quality of life at that point. And I loved math and science. So as soon as I saw that and how I could potentially apply it to help people, that's really what I wanted to do. And in researching degree programs for specifically biomedical engineering at the time in 2002, 2003, there were only 2 places that had an accredited program. And one of them was the U of M, which was right in my backyard. So it worked out really well. And I started off in biomedical engineering, and I ended in biomedical engineering. And I graduated in 2008 at probably the lowest point of the recession. So finding a job was very difficult. If anyone is planning on graduating sometime this semester, it may also be difficult. And what I ended up having to do was I applied for tons of jobs, didn't hear anything back. Had a recruiter reach out to me for a job as an inspector that required a high school diploma only. And it was a 1-year contract. And it was the foot in the door at Boston Scientific that I needed. In less than 6 months, they had hired me on full-time as an engineer in their quality division. I was at Boston Scientific for almost 7 years, and then moved over to Harassment Medical Components. And I've been there in quality and now in project management for the past, I think I'm coming up on 6 years now. So slowly but surely kind of wedged my way into tech industry at the time when I came to it. And here I am now.
My journey at the U of M was a little bit different and unconventional in that I was adult with kids when I decided to go back and complete my degree. I had gone to community college. I'd gone actually to the Data Institute for cosmetology, and through a lot of experiences was very much focused on globalization and developing a sustainable future. And during my time at CLA, I really began to bring together the idea that sustainability and social justice were inextricably linked. And when I was beginning to look at how I could go best out into the world and have a positive impact on that, I was around a lot of people who actually worked in tech. You know, I was not an engineer. I don't have a strong technical background, but I decided to move into that area because I saw a lot of work being done in tech as a way to sustainably alter the future. And there's a lot of opportunity there. And I work in the data and analytics industry, which is a little bit different in that it's not a nonprofit, it doesn't necessarily seem like it has maybe the biggest direct impact on the world, but I actually have an opportunity to partner with organizations like Color of Change, for example, to really bring about data and analytics into places where they're needed to make really impactful decisions, whether it's social justice or sustainability for the future. And so while I still serve, businesses and commercial use cases, there's this other side where I get to bring my expertise in both capacities, in both ways, and bring the experience that I had with regards to sustainability and social justice, and even advocate internally within tech companies to make positive changes for their employees and for the world. And so I'm really incredibly grateful for the education I had in CLA, and particularly some of my professors. And it was a risk pivoting into tech versus going into a nonprofit or graduate degree, but it was definitely the right decision for me.
Fantastic. Thank you all for the introductions. And again, it's really great to see that you all have such unique experiences. I think that will make this panel very rich and educational today. So thank you. I wanted to remind our attendees today that if you do have specific questions for the panelists that you'd like to ask, please put those in the chat box. We will be leaving some time at the end of the event for personal questions, and we will try to prioritize those over our preconceived questions. So if there are specific things that you're looking to know, please put those questions in the chat. All right, so working into our second question, how do you experience your own gender and or sexuality within the tech industry? And then what challenges have you or do you experience considering identity in the workplace today?
I can start off. For me personally, as a queer woman who mostly passes or is perceived as straight a lot of the time, my gender has been a lot more salient in the workplace than my sexuality. I actually was closeted for the first year I worked full time. I did that kind of out of overabundance of caution. I know now that it wasn't necessarily necessary, but I was just really worried that I might be losing out on opportunities or judged differently or something if I let people know that I was gay. So for me personally, social isolation has been a really big thing. I work in a industry and a company that is mostly men. I'm almost always the youngest person in the room, and the small talk usually revolves around kids and lawnmowers and houses. I don't know, things that I don't have much experience with. I'm like, well, I've got my apartment, I've got my girlfriend, I've got my cat. So I've learned some ways to navigate that. And I've found some communities within work and outside that help me kind of survive. Yeah, I have more to say, but I think I'll leave it there. We'll get into more later.
So I come into any room trailing glitter as a gay man. I'm completely open, have been since I joined the workforce, have not really had a whole lot of negative consequences for doing that as being an open gay male. I did have one really negative kind of comment thrown at me once in my entire 13 years in industry, and that was swiftly taken care of. So really, I'm married to my husband. We've been married for 6 years now, and I have pictures of him at my desk. I've got rainbow flags. Like you come by my desk and you know that a gay man sits there, pretty much. And I talk to my coworkers openly about my sexuality and my life as much as everyone else does in the workplace. I don't necessarily introduce myself as being gay right off the bat. It just comes up in conversation. You're working with people 40 hours a week. You don't talk about work all the time, personal stuff is going to come up about what you did the weekend, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it just comes up naturally in conversation, and it's never really been a huge issue for me, except for that one-off situation that I had. I do typically, when I'm interviewing, ask what types of policies, procedures, a lot of benefits questions too, about what, and it kind of gauges on how progressive the industry, the company that you're interviewing with is. So that's probably, you know, my explanation of that. And I do, you know, bring it up haphazardly in interviews or conversation.
For me, my gender expression and sexual orientation expression have evolved over time. You know, when I first stepped into the tech industry and took my first job in Minneapolis, my partner then was a male. And even then, I was very closeted still in a lot of ways, but at the time I had very short hair, I didn't wear makeup. And I was questioned by male colleagues, like, how does your husband feel about you being so masculine? And throughout my time, there have been questions or things said to me, which really just displays the ignorance of the person who's speaking to me. And so as an individual, I've had to, throughout my career, really take a step back, recognize what is said to me for what it is, and figure out what's the best way that I need to respond or handle this for myself. And it's looked different over time. You know, as I moved from Minneapolis to the West Coast and began working for what you would oftentimes consider like the SF bro startup, you know, the reception of me evolved and changed, and I still encountered different difficulties there where, you know, sometimes the men saw me so much as one of them, as somebody who was partnered with a woman and identified as she, they, that they would say things to me at times that were still very off-putting for me. And there's boundaries there that I've had to do a lot of intentional work to set between me and my coworkers, and a lot of just very compassionate and graceful education at times, which does put an emotional burden on you as an individual. And again, you have to make that decision for yourself about what you're willing to take on and what you're willing to say and when. And even if you don't feel like saying something to them, that's perfectly fine. It's well within your right to walk away. But kind of bringing up the topic of conversation where it's headed with some of the questions in the panel and what Arthur and Laurel have said, I have evolved enough to a point as a person, and I'm far enough along in my career where I am extremely discerning about any organization I join now. And when I am in the interview process, I am interviewing that organization just as much as they're interviewing me. And I may not necessarily like throw a pride flag in my Zoom background or, you know, make a big parade about my sexuality or my gender identity, but my gender pronouns will be in my Zoom handle. I will not hide those. I will make reference to my wife, or even as a mother to my children, because I want it to be understood who I am as a person. And if I sense a reaction from them, then I know that perhaps this isn't going to be the right environment. I also ask questions around employee resource groups. In younger startups, they may not be as well established because generally there's just not enough different marginalized identities who have yet formed a group. But as companies start getting over 200 to 300 employees, that frequently becomes a practice within the organization. So asking about what their employee resource groups are. And after the year that we've had, you know, a lot of organizations, particularly in the tech industry, are recognizing that they have a lot of work to do when it comes to marginalized groups within their organizations, and are actively working to increase outreach and to give their employees resources. So you can also ask them what types of resources they provide to their employees when certain situations arise. How do they handle it from a leadership perspective? And what space do they give their employees to take time, go protest, or go attend an event or a summit that aligns with what they are passionate about and how they identify?
Thank you all so much. As a career counselor, a common theme I'm sharing with students is this idea that you are interviewing a company just as much as they're interviewing you. And like that is so important, especially starting off, right? Making sure that you are hopefully ending up at an organization or company where you feel safe and comfortable. And so really that mindset I think is important, but with our marginalized identities, right? Sometimes it's really hard to really play off of that just because you're afraid of maybe retaliation, or that, you know, you're going to be not welcomed, so forth. So I really appreciate all those perspectives, and especially that reference of the two-way interview, because that's super big in our field. Wonderful. So the next question is, do you have any advice for navigating an internship or a job search in the tech industry while seeking to fully embrace your gender and or sexual identities?
Are you okay if I jump in first? So when you look at a company's website now, a lot of tech companies are actually starting to put some disclosures around their employer resource groups or the different types of way they're supporting underrepresented identities within their organization. So be really mindful of that, from my opinion. Look at the website. And again, as you're going through any interview process, once you've decided to apply somewhere, remember that you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, and to ask similar questions that I already posed. That's really crucial to kind of gauging what kind of support you might have when you walk in the door.
I love what you're saying, Carmen. There's definitely a lot. Some companies are putting out like diversity reports, or they have info about their ERGs, which is awesome. I'll also say there's another resource, which is the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index, and that evaluates a company's internal policies, things like, does their non-discrimination policy protect queer and trans people? Do they have trans-inclusive healthcare? Things like that. I will say, take all the official sources with a big grain of salt. I have several friends who work at a company that talks a big game about diversity, but they've actually had some real bad experiences being harassed, hearing a lot of sexism everywhere. So just kind of keep in mind that the culture can vary within a large company quite a bit. So what division you're in makes a difference. If you are able to talk to your network about, like maybe your friend has interned at this place, ask them what it's like, ask them if they know anything about that department or manager. Oh, I think I lost my last idea, but there's a few ideas.
Yeah, Laurel hit on my big one that I used when I first got out of college, which was the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. That is a really good first place to gauge a company's policies regarding LGBTQ employees, and how the company also engages with the larger, broader community outside of its walls. So there is an engagement portion of the Corporate Equality Index as well. When I was at Boston Scientific, I was the lead of the employee resource group for the LGBTQ employees, and we were tasked with filling out that Corporate Equality Index for Boston Scientific, not marketing, not human resources, not leadership, us. So I am very well experienced with the Corporate Equality Index, and it evolves. It changes over time. The bar is constantly being raised year over year, and if a company is striving to maintain its policies and procedures and engagement with the LGBTQ employees and community, and gets 100 every year over year, they're likely going to be well in touch with that more marginalized group. So I've used that. I also have talked to plenty of people that have been in industry. Having a mom that was working in industry, she just knew everyone that was there. So I was able to kind of gauge throughout her network, which was helpful. But yeah, like looking at websites as well, seeing social media is huge. If you are interested in a company, look at their social media feed. If they're posting about diversity and inclusion and activities that they're doing to bring in diverse and inclusive voices, there are also some really good job fairs as well, and websites specifically for those diverse groups of people. And if you see the company on those websites and search forums and job fairs, it's a really good indication that they're looking for diverse and inclusive talent, and they appreciate that.
Yeah, one other note, if you have the opportunity to interview in person, which I realize is a little weird these days, but look around their office, see who's works there, who interviews you. It's certainly not gonna tell you everything. I mean, you obviously cannot tell everything about a person by looking at them, but there's some interesting research that showed that fields with more women tend to be more queer inclusive as well. So maybe if there's a lot of women in the field, in that workplace, it might be a positive indicator.
Also do research on who's in leadership at the company.
Yeah,
if it's all old white men, it may not be as inclusive. If you see a diverse leadership executive team that's on a company, it usually is a really good indication that they are striving to have their leadership represent their workforce.
Thank you all. Yeah, the job and internship search, Josie and I talk a lot with students about those, and they have lots of questions about finding the right fit. How do I find folks who look like me, identify similar to me? So I think that advice is really helpful, especially thinking of COVID and how students are currently navigating their searches, but knowing that you know, we will eventually leave COVID times and we'll go back to in-person, right? The fingers crossed, right? We'll go back to the in-person searching. Another really important topic that Josie and I talk a lot about with our students is networking. So this idea of really building those professional connections, especially early on in one's college career, just as a way to gain mentorship, learn about new opportunities, and really just kind of propel yourself through your career development. So we're curious to hear from the three of you. What are some strategies you've used to network and or build community with other tech professionals who also hold marginalized gender or sexual identities?
Yeah, I started a queer employee resource network at my work. So I met all the queer people that way. It was actually kind of a funny story how it came about. I'd come from the U being president of OSTEM, and I was like, well, now I'm in the workplace and there's nothing like this at my company. So I decided I would take it upon myself to start one. I was closeted at the time. So I sent a lot of really stressful emails to people being like, hi, I saw a rainbow pin on your bag once. Are you potentially interested in joining a LGBT group or know anyone who is? It was really scary to send out those emails. And after, it kind of took a while to coalesce, but now we have an active Pride group, which I'm really proud of. And we have done a lot to push for more inclusive policies and opportunities. So that's also been really great for my personal career and visibility. I've had the opportunity to get to know and speak to quite a few leaders, which is pretty cool. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, so when I first joined Boston Scientific, it's a big company. It's got a huge presence in the Twin Cities area. There was already an established LGBTQ group, employee resource group there. So I joined. They would do like a monthly lunch type of thing. Everyone gets together. It was when it started, it was a very social organization where you can just have like a safe place where you know that you can talk about your whole self and bring your whole self into the workplace and have the dialogues that you may not be able to have during your day-to-day work life. It did evolve from that. So I did become a site leader, and then the state leader, and then the US lead, and then the global lead for that employee resource group over my years. And when we were going through the corporate equality index work, Boston Scientific did not participate in the year where they made it. They wanted all Fortune 500 companies to fill out a survey. So they did The HRC did it on their behalf and scored a 35 out of 100. And that got a lot of eyebrows raised in leadership because a newspaper in Boston picked it up. And so when we were going through and filling out that survey, the next year we got a 65 with all of the information that we were doing and the activities that we were doing as the employee resource group, which still is not good. That's a D or close to an F still. By being part of that organization and having that level of scrutiny in that one area, we were able to kind of launch ourselves in front of leadership and say, here's what you're missing. Here's what we don't have as a group. Here's where we could improve. And here are some of the stories that we have from employees and ex-employees that felt they weren't able to bring their full authentic self to work. So having that available to you and getting engaged with that really helps to kind of broaden the spectrum. It's a great networking thing to do because you can meet people from all different divisions, all different departments and groups. And it helps expand exponentially who you interact with in the workplace. So that's a big one. The company I work for now is privately owned. They are just starting to dip their toes into the diversity and inclusion pool. And when I saw that, I got super excited. And now I'm basically like leading diversity and inclusion for my company informally. So this is going to be an interesting uphill push, I think, for my new company to kind of adopt some of these procedures and protocols and resources.
I will say that my journey has definitely evolved around networking and building community amongst other queer individuals in the workplace or within my industry. Initially, I joined a Series A startup in Arizona, kind of where the next step of my career went after leaving Minneapolis. And at the time, I felt like mostly I was just trying to survive as the only woman in the room, and especially the only queer person at the same time. And so it took a little bit for me to start really owning more of myself and setting boundaries, as I kind of mentioned earlier. You know, I was very much enmeshed in a very strong bro culture, and being the only woman there at times just made it frustrating. But I've reached a point where in my current company, I launched and run our Queers and Allies Employee Resource Group, which started originally just in the Arizona office where I'm based and has grown across North America and globally at this point. And so I've done a lot of building relationships internally because there were a fair number of closeted individuals still within our company. And so really worked on creating a safe space where people can come still knowing they're safe, but they're in good company and well supported. And we also have a number of allies who've joined as well. And so in fact, our group is more allies at this point, but I welcome it because it's still creating that safe space that's extraordinarily important within our company. Moving beyond the four walls, basically, or four walls of where I work, I'm really working on trying to build bridges with other organizations where there are going to be people who identify similar to me, and they're all trying to connect together to help each other, you know, boost their career. And so one of them in particular that I've recently been starting to try to engage with more is lesbians who tech. They're actually going to have a summit in June during Pride Month. You can attend for free. There's also paid options as well, and I'll stick the link in the chat. But it's one way just to start, you know, getting in with a community, a professional community that identifies with you. And I think that's something I wish I had done earlier on. You know, I've spent a lot of time at building connections within the companies I work for. And now I realize that I wish I had done more of that in the beginning, because I would have probably received some really good advice or support along the way when I was the only female queer person in a room, or perceived female in the room. And so that's some of the biggest advice I think I can give, is make connections outside your company earlier.
Thank you all. And our last question, formal question, is what final advice would you offer students who may be nervous about bringing their full authentic self to the table while career planning? kind of covering all the topics that we've already discussed. So job and internship searching, networking, but maybe more particularly with job offers and negotiating, because we know that there's a lot that comes with having to negotiate your job offer, your salary. And I think a lot of times folks choose not to for a variety of reasons. And so if you do have insight on that particular prompt, but just in general, what final advice would you offer our attendees?
I can start off with job offers and negotiation. I have never negotiated a salary. I kind of attempted to this summer when I was doing engineering work for $15 an hour, but that didn't go anywhere. I left. It was all good. I did negotiate location, sort of. When I was hired into this rotational program that was going to send me all over the country for different 6-month stints. And I was really, really nervous about being sent to certain locations that didn't have any sort of legal protections for queer people, and also just potentially just a much more hostile environment for someone like me. And so I was really worried about that. It ended up being okay. The only place I went was Dubuque, Iowa. And there were some struggles there, but I also found a really great community outside of work. In any case, when I was offered this job, I said, I'm interested, but I want to end up back in the Twin Cities at the end, because that wasn't really a given when with the offer. And they said, okay. And then more recently, when I came back as a kind of like a temp before the Peace Corps, I was able to be eligible for the retirement plan because I asked. I wouldn't have gotten that otherwise. So just kind of a note that you don't just have to ask for money. There's other things that people can and do negotiate, and I've had success with that.
I would say that I used to facilitate a class at UW River Falls about diversity in the workplace. And one of the exercises that we did was specifically talking about individuals not being able to bring their full self into the workplace, and specifically talking about closeted individuals. And one of the things that research has shown is that if someone is not able to bring their full authentic self, or they're hiding a portion of themselves in the workplace, that is something that is constantly thought about in the background and worried about and concerned about. And if that is constantly going on in the background, you're obviously not going to be as engaged with the actual work day to day that you're going to be doing. So I would say, if you don't feel comfortable being out, that's totally fine. But if you find a place where you can be your full authentic self, you're going to be much better off. You're going to get more experience. You're going to be able to focus on the task at hand and networking and everything like that. So it's really critical to find the right place that's going to embrace who you really are 100%, so that you can be as engaged as you can be. And I have negotiated salaries and contracts and levels and everything like that. Don't sell yourself short. Like, you can bring up those concerns, and by engaging in that type of like requests, they know that you're fully interested. Like, you're invested in this decision, and you want to make sure that they're as invested in you as you are in them at that point.
I can't emphasize Arthur's point more. I really think it is really incredibly important that you have done the research for yourself to have an understanding of what your market salary is based on your experience and the value that you bring, and that you have strong points to support your value. So it's really important for you to know yourself first. And then if you can know yourself that well, you can go in and you can more confidently negotiate, because you've already decided before that stressful moment where you feel like you have to counter negotiate with somebody. of who you are and what you're worth. And you need to, one, be afraid to not walk away. You know, I think oftentimes, especially when you're getting your first job or you're getting a job at a company that you really feel like you want to be a part of, you really need to be clear for yourself what your walk away point is before you even get to that emotional decision. So as part of knowing yourself, know what you're not willing to go less than in compensation. And as Laurel said, compensation isn't just pay. You know, especially in tech, compensation has, you know, your base pay, your bonus, it could have stock options or equity, it can have other benefits like retirement. And so you need to have a full understanding of their benefits and how they structure benefits packages too from the beginning. So you also know what you're going to be negotiating for later. And if they do come back to you, like Arthur said, with something less than what you thought, it's really important to understand what their reason for that was. Okay, so what information did you use to arrive at this salary or this level of a job title? And what would I have to do to prove to you that I'm worth X amount or this job title? Like Arthur said, it lets them know that you're serious. It also gives you clear visibility into what you would need to do to prove your quote worth to them and what timeline would be required for them to see that in you to pay you what you're worth. So you have all of the information you need to make the best decision for yourself if they will not pay you more or offer you more than you have originally asked for. But again, don't be afraid to walk away. I know right now it can seem up and down with the economy and with job availability. So if you have to take a job just for economic reasons, that's completely understood. But over time, really know yourself well enough and be prepared. I cannot stress again to walk away. I've done this before. Sometimes you just have to do it. I've received offers. I'm like, this is really lowballing me. And I communicate very openly. But then if they are not willing to meet my requests, then I will leave and go somewhere else.
Such useful insight. Thank you all so much. That was great. Final question. I'm going to invite Josie back, who's been monitoring the chat. Were we getting any questions that folks are curious about?
We did get one question. The question is, what's the quality in work life closeted versus out of the closet?
Rough when you're in the closet. Very.
Yes.
I'm very happy I'm out now. I also want to make sure everyone knows that research, I think the research I've heard is about half of LGBTQ people are closeted at work. So, which is a lot. And so you're not alone if you choose to be closeted. That's a super valid decision. And I don't want to make anyone feel like they need to be out in order to have a good career or a good life. So many people have made the decision not to disclose. I felt like I was hiding so much of myself, and being queer was just one part of it. I mean, being the only woman on the team, being the youngest person on the team, being super new. When I started out, and then when I went to Iowa, you know, I was like not from there. It was just a lot of layers of difference between me and everyone else on my team. And it kind of felt like being gay was just one of them that I could kind of keep under wraps. I mean, I'm really happy that I can just say, oh, my girlfriend now. It was also easier back then because I wasn't dating anyone, but yeah, it's definitely the choice that's right for you. And also one note, someone had asked about like how to come out and when to come out. If you want to be picky, you can totally come out in your resume. So like say you're a member of an LGBT group or something like that. Or in the interview, just like mention it in small talk, be like, oh, my girlfriend and I went to a movie. And if you want to wait, you can always just bring it up casually. I think like the casual approach is nice. Or if you're not dating someone, be like, oh yeah, I'm excited to go to Pride this weekend or things like that.
For me, I would say coming out was very much a gradual process over time because there is a part of it that was scary for me. I lived in Arizona where there was absolutely no protection. And so it took me a while to fully feel comfortable insecure that even if something happened and I was let go of my job for my identities, I would be able to find something else, and I'm strong enough to withstand that reality, which is really difficult to accept and hard. And so if you're struggling with that, don't beat yourself up for it. It is where you are at right now in your journey, and it's totally cool. But also know that there is light at the other side too. You know, I'm at a point where my pronouns are on my resume. The fact that I lead Queers and Allies at my company is on my resume, that I'm a DEI advocate and I'm sitting on a board of another company. My pronouns are on my LinkedIn, and I do ask questions during the interview process around what their employee resource groups are like, what representation looks like within their organization, because I've just reached that point for me where I know that my happiness in my job is so much more amplified when I am who I am, and I found an organization that is going to hold space for me and my identities. And it doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that there's not emotional education or emotional burden still on me to educate those who don't know better. But at the end of the day, I for myself am still happier with the decision to be out versus closeted.
I'm just going to echo exactly what they said.
Great. We do have one more question that just came in, and this might be something that panelists, if you want to put anything in the chat, any ideas, but someone is asking if we could share some more resources for groups that students can connect with, or maybe some scholarship programs for women or queer people in tech. If you know of any, we'd love to hear it now, and maybe some suggestions in the chat as well.
I put this in the chat. Oops, I did not put that in the chat successfully. Let me try that again. Out for Undergrad is a conference that's put on every year, and there's an engineering version and there's a tech version. You have to apply to the conference, but if you get in, all expenses are paid, and it's a really awesome weekend of networking and professional development. There's a career fair, so super recommend applying. And that's for LGBTQ undergrad students specifically. There's also Lesbians Who Tech, Carmen mentioned. There's undergrad groups or student groups. So there's OSTEM, there's the Queer Student Union, Queer Student Cultural Center, that's the word. There's Compass, which is for the business school. I'm sure there's others as well. Oh, and then once you, these are more geared towards once you graduate, but there's Quorum, which is the Twin Cities LGBT Chamber of Commerce. They have a young professionals group that meets, I think, monthly.
It's a good point about Chamber of Commerce is, you know, Arizona, we have one too in Phoenix where I live. So definitely check out locally what kind of professional groups exist, you know, wherever you live. It's a great way to even get to know people, especially if you move to a new city to take a job. Seek out those local LGBT groups to just even to form friendships.
I know for folks who are on the call today, we can definitely, anything that's being shared in the chat, we can make that available in our follow-up email to you all, as well as put that in the description of when we upload this eventually to YouTube. We can include those links in the description as well, so that folks have access to those later. So.
All right, we do have another question that came in as well. If you all could talk about if you've received any legal support from your companies, perhaps advice to students who may experience discrimination based on their identities.
I personally have not received legal support from my companies. If you are facing something, I would highly recommend you seeking your own outside legal counsel and support. Because of your identities or some things that may happen to you because of your identities, you could find yourself in a situation where you may have to sign an NDA or some other legal recourse is required with your employer, or if you choose to leave them based on events. And so I really cannot stress enough seeking your own outside legal counsel. I've had to do that before. And you need to make sure that you've got somebody in your corner in just your corner, not your corner and your company's corner at the same time.
Yeah, I haven't experienced anything that was, I'd say, rose to the level of discrimination. The worst I've really experienced was a coworker telling jokes where the punchline was someone was gay. I was waiting for the punchline. It turned out the punchline was the person was gay. But a lot of those kind of low level situations, you can, like, I personally just chose to ignore it and move on. I've also had some situations where I chose to confront it directly with the person who made some comments that I wasn't comfortable with. If you experience, there's also options to take it to your manager, take it to their manager, take it to HR. These are all, or take it to a mentor in your company and say, hey, like, trusted coworker, I've actually done this too. I've gone to coworkers who I trust and say, hey, someone said this thing or did this thing I'm not comfortable with. What should I do? So those are all options in your toolbox as well.
I've only experienced the one point of directed discrimination towards me in the workplace. And that was, misgendering me because of my orientation. And on purpose. It was obviously an intentional thing that they did. And I, having grown up like this since I was, 16, knowing that I was gay, typically just brush it off. But I say that it's not my issue, it's their issue, and kind of just move on. My coworker who was in the conversation with me when that happened went right to HR and reported it on my behalf. And HR got involved at that point and was in my corner because of the company's non-discrimination and harassment policies. So that is a really important thing to review before even signing up with a company, is their non-discrimination harassment policies that they have, and making sure that it is fully inclusive of whatever minorities that it needs to be, whether it be gender identity and sexual orientation, or more than that, obviously. That's a really important thing to review. If they don't necessarily call those out, there may not be any sort of repercussions for those types of situations.
Another note is because of a recent Supreme Court ruling, it is illegal to discriminate against a person based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. That's across the whole US federal rules. There's also state and city rules that apply in some states and cities, but just know that anywhere in the US you are covered against discrimination, which is awesome, highly needed. There's also the Equality Act, which is working its way through Congress, which is going to put that into federal law instead of just a Supreme Court case. So it'll just kind of bolster it further.
The Supreme Court decision was definitely a victorious moment last year when it came out. But I do really want to back what Arthur said, is to ask them for that information earlier. When I joined a Series A startup, that wasn't all figured out yet. And those are things that, in retrospect, I wish had been better defined, and I wish I had vocalized and fought for that more earlier. And now I'm a part of a more mature, still startup, but more mature, and that is defined, and that is explicit, and that is clear. And I do see it enforced within my organization. So I have more, I have more security knowing what that policy is, and I've actually seen it happen.
I will also say, don't be afraid to cause waves or ripples, depending on who you are. So if you realize that the organization isn't necessarily living up to your expectations, I brought this up when I joined my current company. It's a family-owned private business, like headquartered in Germany, and we have 400 employees in Minnesota. And my first week, we had an introduction to all of the different benefits and policies, and all of that with our HR director at the time. And I raised my hand several times when we started talking about health benefits, and I asked if it included transgender healthcare. And not for myself, but just in general, just wanted curiosity of what the stance was from the company side of things. At that time, they only had maternity leave. And I raised my hand and said, what if there is no mom? Like, my director of HR really did not like me in this 1 hour meeting. But don't be afraid to bring those things up specifically to HR, because as an employee, they should be making sure you're as safe as possible in their walls as you would be in your own home.
I will say we've come a long way, from where we were even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even longer than that. But to back what Arthur said, you are still your biggest advocate. You need to be your biggest self-advocate. And there's going to be times where that does involve some ripples or some waves or speaking up. But unfortunately, to some degree, that's still where we're at. But at the same time, there is so much more space for that self-advocacy than there ever has been before. And that is definitely something to be thankful for.
And not only may you be speaking up for yourself in that instance, but you may also be speaking up for other employees who don't feel comfortable speaking for themselves. So when you voice those points, you're not just doing it for the betterment of yourself, you may be doing it for the betterment of other employees as well.
Great. Thank you all so much for those great answers and just being here and participating. And thank you to all the webinar participants as well for taking some time to attend. That is all we have for today. What we'll be doing is we'll send a follow-up to those who are attending, a little survey, some of these resources that we've talked about as well. So keep an eye on that popping into your inbox soon. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to the panelists. This was really great. At times I forgot I was participating and just like sitting back and enjoying it. So yeah, thank you again for all your really great insights and vulnerability today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And anybody who attended wants to connect on LinkedIn or has questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're definitely here to support all of you.
Likewise.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.